Hi, and welcome to this live reading from So Close, Love Grows, Series Book 4 by Renee, Regent, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1, Tilly, Georgia, Dahlia. Everything I've ever done has led me to this moment. The years of working 2 jobs, foregoing sleep and basic necessities, clipping coupons and doing whatever it took to survive. Those days were behind me now. I hoped. As a divorced single parent, I knew too well what it meant to sacrifice in order to make ends meet. My ex, Trey Dempsey, paid his child support for our son Beckett on time, but he wasn't much help otherwise. That's why I was counting on this promotion to general manager of the Riverbank Lodge. It would be a hefty increase in salary and a boost to my career. I had worked for my boss, Gibson Coalbank, for almost 5 years now since he built the lodge. I knew I was on the short list of candidates for the position, but he had also been interviewing potential managers from Atlanta and other places, so I faced some intimidating competition. I paced the floor outside his office, having been summoned by Gibson for a meeting. My heels clicked on the wood floor, echoing slightly off the walls. The lodge was all wood beams and stone with wide windows to take in the views of the North Georgia mountains. It had a homey feel with fireplaces, comfy leather furniture, and locally handmade quilts on the walls. But elegant touches of expensive art, crystal chandeliers, and a marble staircase in the grand lobby bespoke of the taste and style of the Coalbank Empire. I was proud to have had a hand in the success of the lodge, which had become the most popular destination resort in Tilly. Gibson and I had been friends for years, as well as colleagues, but the man was still a billionaire and a savvy businessman. We were on a first-name basis since we met when he first came to Tilly. I used to wait tables at Nichols' Diner, and he was a regular customer. I didn't know back then he was secretly wealthy, and even now he was one of the most down-to-earth people I'd ever met. He hired me on a year or so later when he built the Riverbank Lodge. Since then, I worked my way through the ranks from a restaurant hostess to hospitality supervisor to floor manager. In that position, I was responsible for overseeing guest relations and housekeeping. The general manager position would be a huge step up as Gibson's right hand, managing the entire operation of the lodge. I knew he and I would work well together, but the thought of facing him now made me a bit nervous. Well, maybe a lot nervous. I glanced in the oval mirror above the table, checking my appearance. I'd lost weight recently, and my normally plump cheeks had become more angular, but my deep dimples still showed. My ash-brown hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and my dark brown eyes showed no obvious signs of fatigue. I blew a puff of air out to calm myself and pointed to my reflection. You got this. Now go make it happen. I couldn't help but rearrange the multicolored flowers which sat on a vase on the table below the mirror. I took pride in keeping the lodge looking its best. Taking a deep breath, I knocked on the intricately carved blonde wood door and heard the deep rumble of Gibson's voice in response. Come, it's open. I entered to find him at the small conference table in the corner of his office. The polished wood surface was littered with papers, photos, an electronic tablet, and 2 laptops. He was forever working on some deal or another, either buying properties or building projects. He was a billionaire for a reason, and not only because his family had money. I walked a few steps in and stopped when he looked up at me. You need something, sir? He rose from the table, waving a hand in dismissal. Sir? Really? Have a seat, Dahlia. He gestured for me to sit in one of the plush black leather chairs that faced a massive mahogany desk. As he walked to sit behind the desk, I glanced about the room. It was a blend of modern and rustic, just like him. His blonde hair and beard were neatly trimmed, but his jeans and button-down shirt were casual. I placed my hands in my lap to still them. Clearing my throat, I tried to sound relaxed. So, what's up then? His golden brow arched, but that was the only change in his expression. I have some news, actually. An opportunity came up that I couldn't refuse. Oh. I held my breath. This must have to do with me, or I wouldn't be here. My stomach fluttered like it housed a cache of dragonflies, but Gibson's smile made the tension roll right off my shoulders. And we think it will be a great opportunity for you as well. He leaned back in his leather chair, the fabric making a small squeaking sound. I've been thinking of improving the grounds around the lodge, especially the pavilion area. We are coming up on our 5-year anniversary, so I want to do something special. My excitement began to deflate. He wanted me to handle a special project, no doubt, which was likely a consolation prize for not being chosen as general manager. The adrenaline which had been buzzing through my veins began to fizzle, but I kept an expression of interest on my face. That's a great idea. Are you planning a party? Yes, actually a 2-day event. I have several investors interested in our next project, as well as influential locals whose approval is crucial in eventually obtaining the green light for developing a second lodge in Tilly. It's important they are favorably impressed. This was a surprise, but I should have expected as much. The Colbanks owned one of the world's largest vacation resort development and management companies on the planet. As down-to-earth as Gibson was, development was in his blood. Still, he was respectful of natural resources and concerned with local approval, which was why he was well respected in his industry. That's wonderful news. How can I help? I was dying to know what he wanted from me. If I wasn't getting the promotion, at least a new project would further my skills. A smile grew on his face, and he leaned forward over the desk, clasping his hands together. I sensed he was about to drop big news, and I sucked in a breath. There is so much to do in the next 6 weeks. Satya and I have discussed everything, and we've decided we want you to handle the general manager responsibilities. Oh my, yes, I would be honored. Relief swirled through me, leaving a jittery sensation in my hands. I shook them out, then clasped them in my lap. And please give Satya my heartfelt gratitude. His wife, Satya Colbank, had been a beverage salesperson in Atlanta years earlier. In fact, her work was what had brought her to Tilly. Pointing to the framed wedding photo on his desk, Gibson grinned. If it weren't for you, Dahlia, we might not have met, you know. I smiled because I had unwittingly played a role in bringing the couple together by separately giving them tickets to see my brother Raphael's band play at a local bar. I didn't mind playing Cupid when the couple was as nice and generous as these two were. Besides, they seemed to be soulmates. I had given up on ever finding my soulmate or even dating again. The one man I had loved since childhood had betrayed me. I married another man and he betrayed me as well. I didn't want to try for a third heartbreak, so I avoided relationships. My son and my career were my priorities. I responded to Gibbs' statement with a chuckle. That's true, and you've repaid me many times over by giving me this job. I've learned so much. Thank you. Thank you, Dahlia. You've been a loyal friend and employee. We need to begin planning immediately, though. Your duties as floor manager will be split between the hospitality supervisor and the housekeeping supervisor effective Monday. We'll have a meeting that morning to ensure a smooth transition. Certainly. I'll be there. He slid a paper over the desk along with a rolled poster secured with a rubber band. This describes your duties and a new salary notice, and this, he said as he handed me the poster, is a sketch of the landscaping and remodeling of the pavilion area. You need to review it because the man I hired to oversee the project will be here tomorrow morning at 9. I don't usually ask you to work on Saturday, but we're up against a deadline here. I shook my head. No problem. My son will be with his father all weekend, so I'm free. Good. We'll meet here to review the particulars and devise a timeline, so you'll need to familiarize yourself with the layout. My grin could not be wider. I'll do that. I'm so looking forward to this opportunity. Thank you and Satya for having faith in me. He winked. You may not have the experience some of the other candidates had, but you have something I value most of all. Integrity. I trust you will always do your best, Dahlia Perez. A warm glow spread throughout my body. It was satisfying to be recognized, and the salary they were offering was beyond my expectations. I shook his hand and walked out, ready to begin the next phase of my life. Best of all, I had succeeded on my own. I had learned the hard way that the only person I could count on was myself. Everyone I had ever loved and trusted had let me down, and I would never make that mistake again. I left Gibson's office on light feet. Validation can be a heady experience, and I wanted to bask in it a while longer. The only downside was that some of the other employees may not take the news of my promotion well, in particular my friend Tara, who had also applied for the position. Further, she was hospitality supervisor and would be taking on more duties as a result of the change. I decided to stop by her office to give her the news before she heard from anyone else. We'd become good friends the past few years, so I was sure that she'd be happy for me despite any disappointment over not getting the job. I walked past the front desk and the line of guests checking in for the weekend. Friday afternoon was peak time, so I knew Tara would be in her office. She was at her desk on the phone with what sounded like an irate guest. Yes, ma'am, we will send a maintenance person to your room. It may take a few minutes, but we will take care of it. She reassured the guest a few more times before hanging up and looking at me standing in the doorway of her office. She rolled her eyes and groaned. Tough customer. The usual Friday afternoon chaos. No matter what we do or how we prepare, they always manage to find something that isn't working properly. I hear you. I won't stay long. Just wanted to let you know something. Her ice blue eyes looked up at me from beneath the dark fringe of her bangs. She was around my age, late 30s, but she still had the aura of a much younger woman. She had long, dark hair she wore in a ponytail or braids. She loved trendy clothes and was forever begging me to go to local clubs to dance and drink. I obliged once in a while, but having a 7-year-old son meant more nights at home than out on the town. What's going on? There was no way to preamble this, so I got to the point. I got the general manager position. Mr. Colbank just told me. She smiled, but there was a flash of something else in her eyes. Disappointment. Congratulations, I'm happy for you. She rose and gave me a hug, then sat back in her chair. At least I won't have to get used to a new manager. I leaned against the doorframe, more relaxed now that she knew. Yes, hey, I know you applied, and I hope there are no hard feelings. She shrugged. She was gathering up papers and placing pens in a cup as she spoke, not looking directly at me. No biggie. There'll be other opportunities, I'm sure. Yes, there will. In fact, they are planning on building another resort near Tilly. Cool. The set of her mouth told me she was still processing the news. Then her phone rang again, and she mouthed the word sorry as she answered. I nodded and waved goodbye, and she smiled before turning her attention to her call. That hurdle crossed, I made my way back to my office. I checked my emails, finished some paperwork, then clocked out. I grabbed the rolled poster so I could study it that evening. I was going to be the best general manager this town had ever seen. After stopping for a few groceries, I picked up Beckett from his after-school playdate at our neighbor's house. Tammy Biggs lived 2 doors down from us, and her son Eli was Beckett's best friend. Our neighborhood was an older one made up of 12 cabins that used to be nightly rentals. Now that they had aged, most were rented monthly to families. For the amount of space, it was cheaper than an apartment in town. I knocked on the heavy wood door, partially covered in fine moss. The constant humidity and the canopy of pine trees kept everything damp. The porch, like my own, was in need of pressure washing to cleanse away the pine needles and green mold that gathered every summer. Tammy opened the door and welcomed me in for a glass of sweet tea. Okay, but I can't stay long. Trey is supposed to be over at 6 to pick him up. She gave me a sideways look as I followed her to the kitchen. The key word being supposed. I rolled my eyes and sat at one of the plastic chairs at her tiny table. Her cabin was larger than mine, a 3-bedroom, but the rooms were still small, and with 2 kids, a dog, and a husband, it was quite cluttered. I hung my purse on the back of the chair and gratefully took the glass of tea she offered. We'll see. He was only a half hour late the last time after I chewed his head off. Tammy sat sipping her own tea. Her pale green eyes showed fatigue, but she was in good spirits otherwise. So, did you get the job? Yes, ma'am. You are looking at Riverbank Lodge's first general manager. She tipped her glass toward mine. Cheers, then. I know you'll do well. Then your ex can go suck it. Thanks. And yeah, doing well will give me some satisfaction. Trey always criticized me for daring to dream of being more than I am. I think he felt threatened. She lowered her voice, leaning in. Men, right? They say they want a strong woman, then can't handle it when they find one. I knew she was partially joking. She and her husband Steve had been married for years and seemed happy. She went on to fill me in on some local gossip she had heard, but in the back of my mind I wondered about her comment. Would being in my new position really scare some men away? I decided if it did, they weren't the kind of guys I want in my life anyway. I'd wasted too many years pretending to be someone I wasn't for the sake of love. Now I had taken back my power, and any man who wanted to be with me had better accept me as I am. Later, when Beckett and I walked through the door to our tiny rented cabin, I gave him a hug and kissed the top of his head. With his dark curls and lopsided smile, he resembled his father. But the bright, dark brown eyes and deep dimples were my legacy, as was his stubborn pride. I wanted to give him the best possible life. He deserved no less, and so did I. Right then, I made a silent promise. Someday, we'd live in a much better place. Maybe a fancy log home on a lake where he could fish to his heart's content. A place I could be proud to host family and friends and relax in at the end of a hard day of work. I had much to look forward to, and the satisfaction of doing it on my own.